There's TikTok Shives from David and from Dana. My God. Is there no respite? Is there no relief? Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm often slightly late to the beginning of Ask Away, even when I'm running on time, because I always give my patrons and members right up until the moment that the show is supposed to start to submit their questions. So I wait. The show starts at 6 p.m. my time, so I wait for my clock to click over to 6, and then I turn off I set the form to no longer accepting responses and blah blah blah. So I do it for you, is what I'm basically saying. I do it for you. Okay. Um, I want to comment on something I saw in the chat a minute ago, and then I'll turn to the patron and member questions as I usually do. But I saw Simon and Kara talking about murder mysteries. Simon saying, I tried to do a murder mystery novel set on a convoy escort in the Atlantic during World War II, and that went very weird fast and fell off a cliff. And Kara said, I tried a murder mystery once. It was awful. It reminded me of, you ever see the episode of The Simpsons where Lisa is going to perform that experiment to see if Bart is dumber than a hamster? So she goes to the pet store and she says to the guy behind the counter, I'd like to buy your cleverest hamster. So the guy reaches into a box behind the counter that's full of hamsters and just pulls out just a random hamster. And he presents it to Lisa. And he says, this hamster is the smartest one we've got. He's so smart, he writes murder mysteries. And Lisa says, that's amazing. How does he do it? And the clerk says, he gets the ending first and then works backwards. So I just wanted to share that. Anyway, let's turn for the first portion of the show to my patron and member questions that have been submitted ahead of time. And as always, while I'm doing this, I will be not paying full attention to the live chat. Hi, CMAC. I will be not paying full attention to the live chat while I'm answering the patron and member questions. So if you have something you want me to see in the live chat, please, if possible, hold on to it until I get through the patron and member questions. Then I'll be paying full attention to the chat. So shall we begin with the patron and member questions? Here we go. The first one comes from David Samuel, who says, TOS have the sexiest costumes and sexiest guest stars of the 1960s. With few exceptions, the sexy was lost in later generations. Your thoughts? I don't know. I mean, yeah, the costumes were the sexiest in the sense that they were, for the women, certainly they were the skimpiest, and they had the short mini skirts and the nylons, and a lot of the aliens guest stars had like very skimpy costumes. So I'll go with you as far as that. But I mean, just because a costume isn't revealing doesn't mean it's not sexy or isn't meant to be sexy. I mean, my God, look at how tight fitting the women's Starfleet uniforms were during the TNG era of Trek. I mean, after after season 2 of TNG, the men's uniforms were redesigned and made into two pieces because Patrick Stewart had to have back surgery from how tight the men's uniforms were, and other male cast members complained as well. So they changed the male costume so it was a two-piece, so it wouldn't have that pull on your shoulders and your back anymore. But the women's costumes remained exactly the same. So they still had to wear those really tight, form-fitting costumes for the entirety of the series. And of course, we probably all know about Jerry Ryan's the plight of Jerry Ryan having to wear that ridiculous 7 of 9 catsuit for her 4 years on Voyager. So sexiest costumes, I don't know if it ever really went away. My opinion is Star Trek of across all generations of production has always been an extremely horny show, and has always presented mostly its female cast members, but also its male cast members a time or two as well in a very sexy way, whenever possible. So Larry Bliss lost somewhere in the transporter buffer. What would you say William Shatner's strengths and weaknesses are as an actor? He has had some fine moments as Kirk, and I enjoyed his work in Boston Legal, but where does he rank in comparisons to the greats, such as De Niro, Hoffman, and Pacino? Would you attribute his hamminess on TOS to bad acting habits or poor direction and bad writing? Personally, I think he got lazy as the show wore on. Thoughts? Um, I don't think he warrants any comparison to De Niro, Hoffman, or Pacino. I don't think he's even in the same class as any of those three. But what are his strengths as an actor? His strengths as an actor are he has an amazing voice. He has great screen presence, great confidence on screen, and he has really, really, really good comic timing, which he gets to show off occasionally as Kirk. But you mentioned Boston Legal; he really gets to show off his comic timing in that role as Denny Crane in Boston Legal. So great comic timing, great screen presence, great voice. Weaknesses, I mean, you attribute it to laziness, but I don't. Whatever the cause of it is, he does have he has a tendency, especially in when he's playing Kirk, to deliver a lot of his lines the same way. You can sort of tell with the TV shows. With the movies, it's a little different, but with the TV episodes, the TOS episodes, you can always kind of tell when Shatner was motivated for this episode and when he's just kind of saying his lines. Like, you can tell there's a difference, between like motivated Shatner, who's really trying to give a good performance, and Shatner, who's just like, well, this is what we're doing this week. I memorize my lines. That's what you get. So I don't know if it's maybe it's laziness, maybe it's lack of belief in the material, seeing it as just a job, which, I mean, Star Trek was just a low-rated weekly sci-fi show when he was doing it. It wasn't yet this institution, so I can forgive the guy for being like, oh, this is the gig I got. This is my job. It ain't Shakespeare, but I'll show up and I'll, perform my duties, and meet the minimum standard. So I think a lot of it was just that. And I mean, also, hamminess sometimes is just personal style. Like, that's just, you can try to deconstruct it and try to define it, but a lot of times it just boils down to that's how he does it. Like, why does he, sticking with Shatner as an example, why does he pronounce certain words the way he does? Why does he say, the famous example, why does he say sabotage instead of sabotage? That's just the way he says it. So a lot of the acting quirks that define the Shatner style can be boiled down to, for whatever reason, that's just how he does it. The forever working poor some random geek. Excuse me. That wasn't directed at you, geek. I just had a little tickle in my throat. A little update on Linequin's situation. One of my disabled friends I always give money to. Linequin has been having gut issues and really can't afford to see a doctor. LQ has been asking for money for food and bills every month, so LQ did an experiment. They tested 3 possible food items to see if those were giving them gut issues. Also affects their you said month, I think maybe you mean mouth. Also affects their mouth with numbness. So out of onions, garlic, and gluten, it was sadly gluten that was causing the issues. They seem to have a gluten intolerance instead of celiac based on some research. She was really hoping it wasn't gluten because she was a cook and wheat is in everything. So now, on top of their disability issues, they had a head injury, hers and her wife's poverty, both disabled. They now have to pay for more expensive food to avoid gluten. LQ's PayPal is 27count@gmail.com and Cash App is $Linequin. Can you imagine trying to budget for a dietary need like gluten-free food while being in poverty? Fuck this country. And that's one of those things that a lot of people who don't have to deal with that on a regular basis don't really think about. Like, you think about poverty in terms of, you imagine just kind of an average person, just like a generic person, and you say, boy, if you didn't have enough money to pay your electric bill or whatever, like, that would be a terrible burden. That would be a terrible way to live. But it gets even more complicated if you allow for the fact that a lot of people in poverty are not an average generic person. Like, a lot of people have specialized needs, whether it's specialized dietary needs or health needs or various other accommodations that they might need just to attain what many of us consider a baseline of comfort and mobility and that sort of thing. And yeah, it can be damn near impossible. Like even if you are even if you're not quite living in poverty and you're making enough money to get by, but then all of a sudden, oh, you develop an allergy and you need to start having a specialized diet, or oh, you go to the doctor and oh, you have a heart condition, you need to cut sodium out of your diet, you need a specialized diet for that, or you have a gluten sensitivity, or whatever, you know, um, all of a sudden now you don't make enough money because you can't just go to the grocery store and buy whatever's, on sale that week to be able to feed yourself and feed your family. Now you have to specialize your grocery shopping to meet this particular need. And it's terrible. It's absolutely fucking terrible. My heart goes out to Linequin and anybody else who deals with that. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, keep that PayPal and Cash App in mind, everybody. I'll bring up the charity links again at the end, but if you can afford to help folks who are in need like that, that is greatly appreciated. Sergeant Flux, the DS9 episode Take Me Out to the Holosuite, is a fun and ridiculous episode that withdraws viewers temporarily from the dark and grimness of the Dominion War. However, has some very dark undertones in regard to the antagonist of that episode. The USS Tucumbra, captained by a rather intolerant Vulcan named Soluk, is a segregated ship exclusively crewed by Vulcans. Upon a review of this episode, I came to the shocking realization of how messed up it is that Soluk is allowed to run his ship like that. And with this realization, I started to frame other Vulcan appearances through this lens. Before, I found it hard to watch Enterprise because the Vulcans always seemed too un-Vulcan. But after realizing that there is a segregated ship and how Vulcan intolerance existed in the TNG era, it started to make more sense. Even the existence of the logic extremists makes sense. Perhaps this would make a good subject for a Trek video, for a Trek Actually video, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Well, no, you're right. I mean, it even goes back... It goes back to classic Trek. Think of Sarek. Sarek is a dick. I don't know what other way to put it. Like, Sarek is a dick. And you can interpret that, because Sarek only appears in one episode of classic Trek in Journey to Babel. And you can attribute some of his dickishness to, well, he's mostly interacting with Spock. And, he and Spock are written to have a very strained relationship. So maybe some of Sarek's dickishness is just due to that being his relationship with Spock, and that's how they kind of bounce off of each other. But he's like that with the other characters he talks to as well, and he's like that with his wife. I mean, not in a malicious or cruel way, but in a very sort of cold, condescending, dismissive way. Sarek's a dick. So the idea of Vulcans generally being condescending, holier-than-thou assholes, you can trace it back to TOS. So yeah, when they introduced the Vulcans in Enterprise as being mostly that, as being these paternalistic pricks who don't believe in humanity and have been holding humanity back from pursuing space travel and all of that stuff, that's one of the elements of Enterprise that I really like. I think that it doesn't necessarily bear the kind of fruit dramatically or narratively that I wish it had, but the idea of casting the Vulcans in a more blatantly antagonistic role where they're not villains, but they are very antagonistic toward Archer and his crew. I thought that was a really smart way to go, because yeah, it is, there's the implication of that going all the way back to classic Trek. So I don't, anytime Vulcans are presented as assholes, I think, yeah, that follows. Like that matches what we've been shown about them. Not that they don't have their positive aspects as well, but they've always had at least the potential to be dicks. David Colby, attorney at Ape Law. You cut up his brain, you bloody baboon! Easily beats "Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape" for a singularly best Planet of the Apes line, though it's followed closely by "It's a madhouse! A madhouse!" Now that I've given the stream and Steve a chance to enjoy Steve's impeccable Heston impression, thank you, I have to say, nothing more perfectly suited the era this movie came from more than the cold open in a spaceship with an astronaut watching the stars going by And then he pulls out a big ass cigar and just lights it up. The other funniest part was when the opening had written by Rod Serling on it, and I shouted, "Oh, that explains it." Anyway, was Captain Taylor just stupid? Why is he shocked he's on Earth? The apes speak English. They have horses, Steve. I can believe maybe a similar hominid might evolve on another planet, but horses too? I think this twist worked better in the 1960s when people were stupider. I don't have a question. I just really liked Planet of the Apes. I like Planet of the Apes too, by the way. I like the classic series from the 60s and 70s, and I like the new ones as well. Um, and even the Tim Burton one. I mean, it's not a good movie at all, but it's good for like a mystery science theater riff tracks kind of watch. You know, it's good to watch and make jokes about. But yeah, I like Planet of the Apes a lot, so I'm with you there. Um, yeah, you know what it is though? It's not that Taylor was stupid or the audience at the time was. It's you have to remember in the 50s and 60s, it was a commonly accepted trope in most popular science fiction, especially popular science fiction that came in the form of TV or movies, where they actually had to produce it visually, that aliens just mostly looked like us, that alien planets mostly just looked like Earth, right? That was not unusual at all. I mean, how many episodes of Star Trek are there where the Enterprise, where the crew beams down to a planet and the aliens just look like people, you know, that are even in TNG, they did that. Like the aliens, they just look like humans. Which, by the way, because I'm a fan of that kind of sci-fi and I'm a fan of the Twilight Zone and the old Planet of the Apes and stuff, like I think that's fine. I think that's completely fine. Like I like some of the character designs of aliens and stuff that Star Trek and Star Wars have done with the makeup and special effects. Like I do think some of that is really really cool. But if they made a Star Trek show where there were aliens and they just look like people, I'd be completely fine with that. I don't give a shit. Um, but that was a very common trope at the time. So George Taylor was a character in that um, in that genre. So, as a protagonist in a pop sci fi story from the 60s, if he landed on an Earth like planet and saw that there were apes that, you know, were supposed to look like apes from planet Earth, just a little more evolved, and were riding around on horses, and there were a lot of other Earth like features of this society, you know, he's a sci fi character from the 60s. So, he's not going to think anything weird because that's just what everybody assumed aliens and alien planets looked like. Andy Lawler, hey Steve, like you, I'm a huge space nerd. Astronauts are my heroes as well. I even met Challenger pilot Mike Smith 8 months before that tragic mission. Wow, that's amazing. When the shuttle fleet was decommissioned, it rankled me that the US had to rely on other countries to get our people and projects to space. Having commercial options, SpaceX's Crew Dragon so far, has given us our independence back. The failures of both Boeing's Starliner and SpaceX's Starship remind me that it's the government's job to establish exploration, only then to turn it over to private companies when it's solidly established, as European royalty paid for New World expansion, then allowed, say, the East India Company to maintain it. As only NASA has achieved manned moon missions, I think NASA should run that for the foreseeable future with the Artemis program and Orion spacecraft. What are your thoughts on private versus state-run spaceflight and when the public-private transition should occur? Thanks. Oh, I very much believe that it should be that public uh, space flight or government space flight should remain in the lead uh, in perpetuity, because then you can at least make the argument that it's being done for all mankind, not for the profit of individual companies. I don't have a problem with private space flight. I think if Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Richard Branson want to have their own private space travel companies and send people up into space, as long as they are doing it in accordance with established and internationally recognized safety procedures, and they're not, you know, sending vehicles into space that are unsafe or that are putting people's lives at risk. I have no objection to that at all, but they should never be allowed to take the lead in exploration. They should always be uh, doing business kind of on the side. They should never be the main thrust of human spaceflight ever. I don't think. Um, and when they interact with national space programs like NASA, it should be in in the role of a contractor, like Boeing or McDonnell Douglas or the other, the contractors that built the ships that were taking astronauts into space and ultimately to the moon in the 60s, or where, yes, it's a private company building it, but it's all under the auspices of NASA. It's to supply vehicles to NASA according to NASA design specifications, or specifications that were designed in cooperation between NASA and the contractor for the purpose of a NASA project. I very much believe that's the way it should always go. General Contact Unit problem child. Steve, aside from the ones like Cosby or Weinstein who actually ended up in court, how many of the prominent guys called out during Me Too can you think of who actually ended up having their careers destroyed? The other day, I got recommended a video where Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about Pluto on a major science YouTube channel. On, I think, the same day, I got recommended a Cracked video about the science building transporters that use Lawrence Krauss's The Physics of Star Trek as a source, and name checked it and him multiple times. Last year, Morgan Freeman narrated a big budget Walking with Dinosaurs style documentary. All three of these dudes had serious accusations laid against them during Me Too, and somehow they still seem to have careers. Remember when we were told we were destroying people's careers by sharing these stories and accusations? I can think of like one instance where it actually played out like that. Joss Whedon, and that's it. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot more examples of it not wrecking someone's career than of it actually wrecking someone's career. I mean, look, even, one of the examples I was thinking of just recently before I even read your question, Louis C.K. I saw, who was it? Was it Bill Maher? Probably. Bill Maher usually says incredibly shitty things, but Bill Maher said something recently in an interview about how, oh, it's time for us to let Louis C.K. come back. He's been away for long enough. He's paid his penance. And I thought, has he really paid a penance? I mean, he doesn't do his TV show anymore, and he made a movie that didn't really get picked up, and he hasn't been able to make any movies since then. But he's continued to tour as a stand-up comedian. Like I think he took less than a year off from doing stand-up and then went back on the road. And I haven't paid any attention to him, but as far as I can tell from the way people talk about it on Twitter and such, he's been doing fine. He hasn't gotten a lot of like mainstream attention, but he's been doing fine. He's even done comedy albums that have won Grammys, for Christ's sake. So, I mean, has he been canceled? Like, I mean, he hasn't gotten a multi-million-dollar Netflix deal or anything, but that doesn't mean that he's been, shunned. I mean, he still has a career basically doing the same thing he was doing before Me Too, before he supposedly got canceled. So, yeah, that's another example of someone who you would think like, well, I guess they're just finished. And no, not really. So yeah, the whole cancel culture thing is grossly exaggerated and overblown. The examples of people whose careers have legitimately been ended are very, very few. Very, very few. John Burns, worst father, Worf or Jim Carrey at the beginning of Liar Liar? Jim Carrey, because his son didn't deserve it. Lynn Kibblemom, hi Steve, hope you are doing well. My question is about guilty pleasures. Do you have one? Mine is Charlton Heston. Detest the man, but love watching many of his movies. One of my favorites is the original Planet of the Apes. Here we are again, which I saw when it came out. At the time, the ending and the apes was quite the shocker. Here's a look. See that? And, David Colby, are you saying that Lynn is one of the unintelligent audience members for being shocked by that ending? You see that? You see that? Here's a little gem I recently discovered that I thought you would enjoy, since I know you are a fan of the Twilight Zone. I like to think of it as the 169th episode of Twilight Zone, a fan-made edit of Planet of the Apes, which was co-written by Rod Serling. It condenses the 2-hour movie into a 30-minute black and white Twilight Zone episode, complete with opening and closing narration by Serling and Twilight Zone credits. Enjoy. And I did get a chance to watch this earlier. it's nicely done. It's very clever. Um, Me being a Twilight Zone superfan could detect the ways in which it doesn't get it quite right, but like the aesthetic of it, of framing it like an old fashioned TV show with like the Academy ratio for the picture frame, and putting it in black and white, and putting in transitions to black for commercial breaks. Not all of those are placed quite right, and the transitions don't always work quite well. They don't feel like it would have been an actual transition to a commercial break on a Twilight Zone, but that's just nitpicking on my part. Overall, it was done very, very well. And it's a little, I mean, the narrative is pretty fragmented because you are taking a 2-hour movie and chopping it down to a 25-minute TV episode, but very well done given the fact that that's what they did. Like it still mostly makes sense and is fairly coherent given the fact that you're chopping 90 minutes out of a 2-hour movie and presenting it as like a half an hour thing. So yeah, I liked it a lot. It was very cool. Guilty pleasures. Yeah. I mean, the previous question was about like actors who have been Me Too'd and stuff like that. I mean, I still watch Superman Returns and enjoy it, even though it stars Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor and Bryan Singer directed it, and they're both pieces of shit. I still enjoy it. I mentioned in a video not too long ago David Copperfield, the magician, who there was an article about more uh, allegations of sexual misconduct made against him from across many years of his career that was published last week, I think, or a week before last. That's a guilty pleasure because I mean I think we should believe people when they report that they've been abused or harassed or been the victim of misconduct like that. I think we should take those accusations seriously. So I don't want to just dismiss them and say, "Oh, David Copperfield, he didn't do that." Right? That just doesn't seem right to me. So, but I can't tell you that I don't still watch David Copperfield specials from years ago in the privacy of my own home and enjoy them. Like I would feel shitty about promoting it or singing his praises, in public because of those accusations. But in the privacy of my own home, I still enjoy them. Um, so yeah, that's another one. There are a few other ones that are like that. People who have done or said really indefensible things that I still enjoy their work, and usually I try to just enjoy it privately because I don't want to give the impression by praising their work. I don't want to give the impression that I approve of or am willing to give them a pass for the things that they did or are accused of doing. But yeah, I have some guilty pleasures. Joe C, no question, just happy holidays to you and the community. Cheers. Well, thank you very much, Joe. Happy holidays too. To anyone who is celebrating Memorial Day this weekend, I hope you have a good one. Brian McKinley, Steve, I'm torn. I don't know if you have heard, but Kevin Spacey, boy, it's like Me Too week in the questions. I don't know if you've heard, but Kevin Spacey was acquitted in both of his trials for his accused sexual misconducts. Now, Spacey was an actor whose work I really enjoyed, and it saddened me to hear the accusations leveled against him and think they were probably true. Now what? I strongly suspect that there is some truth to the stories told about him and am generally in the believe the victim camp. However, I also want to believe in the outcome of a legal trial. I don't want to be like those Trump supporters that dismiss Trump's rape finding because they don't want to believe it. Where do you see the appropriate balance on something like this? Well, for me, Spacey is a really good example of someone who I believe in all likelihood did the things he is accused of doing. But in most cases, and I think one of the accusations against him was of like would have been like an act of sexual assault. Um, like some of them are very serious allegations, but of the kind that would be difficult to prove in court, which unfortunately is the case for a lot of sex crimes, and that which is then exacerbated by the tendency to not take accusations seriously and not believe victims when they report being victimized and all that stuff. But a lot of what Spacey is accused of are things that are completely inappropriate should not be done, should not be tolerated ever, but do not quite rise to the level of criminal behavior. So I'm completely willing to accept that he was acquitted of criminal charges, or that he was not found to be legally responsible based on these things that he did, while still believing that he probably did most of that stuff. It's just that it doesn't rise to the level of criminal. Like, I don't know if you watched the two-part documentary series about him, um, Spacey Unmasked. I think it originally aired on CNN, but it's streaming on the Max streaming service now. I watched it last week, and I mean, the stories told about him are terrible. Like, he's a piece of shit, and there's no excusing it, and there's no and there are so many different but similar stories from so many people who have known him throughout his life that it becomes difficult to deny. Like, all these people are making it up, all these people just independently made up the same story just to fuck with Kevin Spacey, you know so I believe it. I believe that most, if not all of it, actually happened, and he did the things that he's accused of doing. It's just that it doesn't rise to the level of something criminal. And that's a category we need to remember exists, because a lot of people use the legal system as kind of a get out of jail free card, literally. And they say, like, well, I went to trial and he was acquitted, therefore he didn't do it. Or he's a good guy because he went on trial and his innocence was proven. And that's not the way it works. Not guilty does not mean exonerated. Not guilty does not mean definitely innocent, definitely didn't do anything. Not guilty means there was a reasonable doubt and the prosecution failed to prove its case. And if there is still a lot of evidence that you as an individual find convincing, that, well, even if there wasn't enough evidence to convince a jury or a judge to find a legal conviction, you can still think, yeah, but it's still more likely than not that he did this, and he should be held accountable for it in some other way, in a social way, in a professional way, what have you. So the legal portion of it is not the end all and be all for me. I think it's, and you're right. I don't think we should get into the habit of saying, like, well, the outcome of the trial doesn't count. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the outcome of the trial is the outcome of the trial, and it doesn't necessarily testify to the comprehensive innocence of the guy who was acquitted. Like in Spacey's case, I think a lot of what he did might not rise to the level of criminal acts, but it's still stuff that should not be excused or tolerated. Stephen G. Clenard. Hey, Steve. There's a credible rumor going around, wink, that Eddie Izzard will have a recurring role on Star Trek Legacy, playing the spawn of the baby space whale from that one episode with the baby space whale. I heartily approve. The superfans demanding Star Trek Legacy deserve nothing less than an exhaustive exploration of their favorite baby space whale from that episode with the baby space whale. How long does a baby space whale live? Does it ever get a craving for that sweet, sweet Enterprise warp plasma energy? Was it as creeped out about Geordi's Leah Brahms hologram as the rest of us? Anyhow, what's your favorite Eddie Izzard movie? Mine is Velvet Goldmine. Fight me on this. I gots the mott. I looked up Eddie Izzard's filmography earlier, and I picked a favorite movie, but I forgot. So I'm looking it up again right here while I'm talking. What was my favorite? Which did I choose? Shadow of the Vampire. Yeah, my favorite Eddie Izzard movie is Shadow of the Vampire. There you go. Starring Willem Dafoe as Max Schreck and John Malkovich as F.W. Murnau. Agent Meister, who believes you have not experienced the Steve and Stuffy shorts until you have viewed them in the original Klingon. Peldor Joy, Steve, I enjoyed your video about the various iterations of the story that gave the world Batman for the first time. And it got me thinking, what was your first experience with Batman? When did he first come into your life? Or how did you first become aware of him? As I remember it, and memory is a fickle thing, I was visiting my grandparents' house when I was around 7, and the 60s show was on the TV. I think the villain of the week was the Bookworm. By the way, another Planet of the Apes connection, because the Bookworm was played by Roddy McDowall. I can't put my finger on it, but as I watched enthralled as Messrs. West and Ward were flouncing around the place with vim and vigor, I recall thinking that there was something special about this, as if somehow my future self was sending me a message back through time, telling me that this will be really important to me for the rest of my life. And it really was. A few months later, I went to see the '89 movie thinking it was just a longer version of the '60s show. It certainly subverted my expectations in that regard. Uh, the '60s show, a rerun of the '60s show, might have been the first time I saw it as well. It was either that or um, one of the later iterations of Super Friends. Like I know the last couple of seasons of Super Friends, it was retitled the Superpowers show, and I had action figures that were based on the Superpowers show. And I had a Batman action figure and a Superman action figure and a couple of other ones from that toy line. And I was really young when I had those. So I think it was either reruns of the Adam West show or it was seeing Batman on Superpowers or Super Friends. It was one of those two. And then I saw the movie in '89, and that really hooked me for life. And then I started reading the comics, and yeah, so it kind of went from there. So it sounds like we traveled a similar path in terms of our Batman fandom. But yeah, it was either for me, it was either the Adam West show or the Superpowers show. Isaiah Taylor. So, Steve, would it be wrong if my Moths movie, assuming that it is ever made, be shot as a television movie stage format, no rapid cuts, camera movements, etc., as opposed to cinematic? I'm taking inspiration from the late '80s, early '90s, and earlier creature monster movies. I don't know, but the use of stage lights, normal camera movements, practical effects all make those movies rather enjoyable to me. I'm just concerned as to whether people would like it. It's a standard B movie story, nothing more, nothing less. I think shooting it like that would make it stand out, especially since it would be an independent film. I'm also wondering, does the technology still exist for me to make such a film? Heck, one scene will show some moths, albeit vintage stock footage of moths, feeding off the toxic waste, and the picture turns into an inverse red negative image to symbolize fear, overlaced with a slow heartbeat. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, it does sound cool. I think technology exists that could allow you to simulate um, pretty much any previous aesthetic that you wanted to. And if you were a stickler for authenticity and you wanted, I mean, I'm sure you can find someone on the internet, I'm sure can hook you up with vintage equipment that would allow you to recreate, you know, the kinds of effects that they were doing back then when they were actually when that was actually the state of the art technology. But the important thing about your question that I noticed is you said, first of all, I think your idea is completely fine. If you want to, if you finish writing the movie and you ever get the opportunity to actually make it and you want to make it in a way that is like an allusion to 1990s creature features and shoot it in, you know, the 4:3 Academy ratio screen size that TVs used to have, and you know, and make it in a visual style that evokes like a TV movie or a direct to video movie or something like that. I think that's completely fine if that's your vision for the movie. You say, I'm just concerned whether or not people would like it. Don't worry about that. Worry about making the movie to be the best movie it can be. While you're writing the script, worry about writing the best script you can possibly write. And you're the judge of that. You're the writer. You know what story you want to tell. And if you should show it to people, like find people that you trust who get what you're trying to do and will also be honest with you when they read it and take, you know, be open to criticism, constructive criticism. And if you show it to someone who you trust, who knows what they're talking about and gets what you're trying to do, and they say, okay, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, like be willing to compromise on things and to change your mind and to see different points of view. But ultimately, your job as a storyteller is to tell your story the best way that you can, not to make something that people will like. Because I guarantee you, if you do a good job and let's say your dream comes true and you get to actually make this movie someday, and you're able to do it more or less the way you want to do it, and you do a good job so that you yourself when you take your ego away, when you set your ego aside and you watch your movie that you have made, if you can tell yourself, you know what, this is good enough. I did a good job on this. Maybe I had to compromise here and there. Maybe it's not exactly how I thought it would be. Maybe it's not exactly as good as I hoped it would be, but this overall, I'm happy with this, right? If you can honestly say that, and you're not just lying to yourself or buttering yourself up, if you can honestly say, this is a good job that I did, I guarantee you there will be people who watch it who will like it too. The audience is there somewhere. Now, you may have trouble finding it, but there's an audience out there that will enjoy it, that will appreciate it. So while you're in the process of writing it, and if you ever get into the process where you're actually making the movie, don't worry about, well, I'm worried if people will like this or not. Don't worry about that. Write for the story. Don't write for the audience. Write for the story. And that's my advice. Wolfie Basach, hi Steve. As my work rota has been temporarily shifted this week, I won't be able to listen to this week's show, so I'm going to rattle off a total cop-out of a question and have done with it. So my question is, have you got any major ambitions or wishes in life? Maybe obtain 10 million subscribers? Be asked to write a script for a new Trek show? Go and visit Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago in a B-52 full of cat shit? Anyway, I'm sure you're having a great show, and if it turns into the greatest Ask Away of all time, no one tell me. I mean, the things you describe are ambitions, but like they're never going to happen. So yeah, I mean, yeah, of course it'd be great to have 10 million subscribers. Of course, it'd be great to have 10 million subscribers. It'd be great to be able to write a script for a Star Trek show. If I was given the creative freedom to write the script I wanted to write, which I doubt that I ever would be, that'd be great, but that's never going to happen. You know, it would be great to drop a B-52 worth of cat shit on Donald Trump's house. That'd be fantastic. That's never going to happen. As far as somewhat realistic ambitions, not really, nothing. I mean, just it'd be cool to go see to go visit the Baseball Hall of Fame someday. I've never been to the Baseball Hall of Fame. That'd be kind of neat. You know, it'd be cool to make it out to San Francisco one of these days and actually visit Jason. That'd be cool. You know, just things like this, simple things like that. Nothing, no major ambitions. I don't really, I know it's weird. I don't really think in those terms. You know, I don't really think in terms of like, one day I'm going to have this many YouTube subscribers, or I'm going to make this much money and I'm going to do this and do that. And I don't really think in those terms. But yeah, just little stuff. Now, if someone offered me a B-52 full of cat shit, I'm definitely not saying I wouldn't take it. Joe McClory, been thinking about villains lately. So who are some of your favorite villains and why? Ooh, oh man. Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. I've never read the book, but as he was portrayed by Javier Bardem in the movie, oh, what a great villain. Oh my God. Inhuman, but yet still compelling, you know, like a force of nature, like some kind of ancient eternal evil, but yet not remotely supernatural. There's something so unique about that character. I love Anton Chigurh so much. What's another good villain? I mean, we just watched Spider-Man 2 for the podcast. I can't really avoid mentioning Spider-Man 2's version of Doc Ock, Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. That's a good one. From the Batman comics, I always really liked Bane, like the comic book version of Bane. I thought was a great villain. Trying to think of it. I'm sure there are others that I'm not. I'm blanking. I can't think of any. I know there are others that this is another thing that I looked up earlier. and I've completely forgotten. Um, oh, Nurse Ratched. I was going to mention her too. Yeah, I'm looking up a list of movie villains. Yeah, Nurse Ratched from Cuckoo's Nest. Great villain. Holy shit, fantastic villain. Um, Nurse Ratched specifically because she is definitely a villain. She's definitely a character that you come to hate, but she's not evil. She's callous and she's cruel and she's rigid, you know, and she's very committed to enforcing the rules of this inhumane system that she kind of sits near the top of. But she's not evil. Like she's doing something that she genuinely thinks is the best thing for these people. And you can kind of make an argument for her point of view given the overall context, even though you're not on her side and you're definitely more on the side of McMurphy and the patients at the hospital. You can kind of see Nurse Ratched's side of it. And she's not an evil person, but she's also a very easy to hate person, you know, and very much the villain of that story. So Nurse Ratched would definitely be on my list too. Kara Hughes. Hi, Steve. We know that DS9 is probably your favorite Star Trek series. Yeah. And I just have one question regarding the Dominion War. Do you think the Federation actually won, or do you think that we merely fought the Dominion to a standstill until there was no option but for them to sue for peace? I'm just thinking that in 200 years, give or take a few, the Dominion and the Federation might be allies or even friends, which of course makes the whole war thing moot. Of course, I may be overanalyzing here, but I would welcome your thoughts. Well, maybe you're overanalyzing in terms of like projecting into the future of like imaginary Star Trek history, but I feel like you're just describing the way a lot of wars have gone in actual human history. I mean, if we find out through some subsequent Star Trek project that the Dominion War was what it was, and it was this terrible, devastating, you know, humanitarian catastrophe with, you know, all these planets destroyed and all these millions and millions of people dead. But then in the future, sometime after that, decades or centuries down the road, the Federation and the Dominion became allies, or the Dominion joined the Federation, or whatever. Um, that's how a lot of actual wars in history have gone. I mean, look at my country and your country. The United States and the United Kingdom today are the strongest of allies. 250 years ago, my side was making war on your side to drive you off of our continent and gain independence. You know, Britain and France were mortal enemies for generations. The United States and Germany, the United States and Japan, a lot of Western countries and Germany and Japan were terrible enemies for decades and made war on each other. And then after the war was over, they found allyship and peace and coexistence. So that's, you know, it doesn't, I mean, it reminds me of the, there's a line from a speech in a Doctor Who episode, and I know it because I've seen clips of this. I haven't gotten this far in my watching of Doctor Who to actually get to these episodes because it's from the Peter Capaldi era, and I'm still in the Matt Smith era. But it's from one of the episodes where Capaldi gives one of those great speeches, and one of the lines, he's talking about two sides who are going to war, and he says, you know, there's a line about something like, well, when the war is over, when you're done fighting and you are forced to do what you were always going to have to do from the very beginning and just sit down and talk. And that's an expression of how absurd war is, because no matter how long the war lasts, no matter how many people are killed, no matter who wins and who loses, every war ends with the two sides sitting down and talking and hammering out an agreement that will define their post-war peacetime existence with each other. And it's tempting, maybe a little naive, but still tempting to say, why can't we just skip to that part? You know, the war, this is how all wars end. This is always what was going to happen. We're going to settle our conflict at a negotiating table. So why couldn't we have just done this from the start and not killed each other? You know? So I think it's just you're just pointing out one of the truths about war. And it's not even necessarily, it's not really a comment on Star Trek or Deep Space Nine or that particular storyline or anything. It's like that's, if that's the way the Dominion War shakes out decades or centuries down the line in the fictional Star Trek world, well, that's the way a lot of real wars have gone as well. MW Ridra, happy long weekend, Steve. Regrettably, I will probably miss the live stream because I have a late work meeting today. Blah. Anyway, my question today is if you have any recommendations of music, movies, or shows that you think are really good, but that I might not have heard of. My hidden gem recommendation for you is a song called I Like It Heavy by Hailstorm. Have a good one. Well, I mean, I don't know all that much about your taste or your habits, but one of my favorite bands that I have recently been listening to again after not really listening to them for a few years, but I got kind of nostalgic for them and went back and have been listening to some of their older albums. I love the band Built to Spill. I don't know if you're a Built to Spill fan or not. They're not like a completely unknown band. Like they do have a lot of fans and a lot of people who enjoy their music, but they were never like a huge band. They were never like, they never had like a massive crossover radio hit or anything. They made a lot of albums. There's a lot of great music by Built to Spill. And they definitely have a fan base. So they're not completely unknown. You may know about them. They may be one of your favorite bands, or you may know about them and think they're the shits. I don't know. But if you've never heard of Built to Spill, I highly recommend them. And my favorite Built to Spill albums are Perfect from Now On, which is just a work of genius, and Keep It Like a Secret is a great album that has, I think, probably the closest they ever have gotten to like a hit single, which is the song "You Were Right," you were right, which is a great song. So yeah, Built to Spill, and also Ancient Melodies of the Future. Great album. Oh, what a great fucking album. If you've never gotten into Built to Spill, I recommend Built to Spill. Shazy, who is doing what he can like everyone else. Good evening, Steve. There's this quote that's really been resonating with me lately, especially given my peer group's lack of political will in even discussing important topics like climate change and the genocide in Gaza, let alone actually doing something about them. It is as follows. A liberal is someone who opposes every war except the current war and supports all civil rights movements except the one that's going on right now. Do you agree with the sentiment? A salient example is how reviled Martin Luther King was while he was alive and calling out the white moderates for their inaction in the face of injustice, only to be now revered as a hero that magically came along and fixed America's racism. I mostly agree with the statement. I don't think it's entirely fair. I don't think all liberals are like that. But I think enough liberals are like that. Enough of us are guilty of that and do fall into that, fall under that description. That perception is something that we should all keep in mind and be constantly trying to disprove through our actions, like not trying to disprove it through arguments and stuff, but like to be living in a way that would disprove that. If you are a liberal, as I generally consider myself to be. Usually I use the term progressive because it's a little vaguer and it leaves more space for things that I might believe in or advocate for that don't fit some strict definition of liberalism. A lot of people are real sticklers for definitions. Me, not so much. I'm perfectly happy to speak in broad terms. But a lot of folks, especially on the extremes of the political spectrum on either end, really like very, very narrowly defined terms and categories. But I would say I mostly fall into the general range of being a liberal, and I don't want to be that kind of liberal. I don't want to be the kind of liberal who is against every war except the current war, or who is in support of all of the civil rights movements that already took place that I don't need to bother with anymore, that are safely in the past. I don't want to be the white moderate that Martin Luther King describes in Letters from a Birmingham jail. Like I do not want to be that person. And I keep that perception, I keep that idea in mind to remind myself You don't want to be that. Don't be that. Don't fall into that trap. Don't allow yourself to become that kind of person. That's important to me. And I think it should be important to everybody. So yeah, I think as a liberal, if you identify yourself as a liberal, if that's how you think of yourself, I would want to keep that in mind at all times and to be striving always to live in a way that defies that perception, for sure. Russell. Hi, Steve. Like I stated before, this will be a topic of Andy versus Worf. Now, let's start by saying I don't think it's a fair comparison. Andy's journey has always been about redemption and not so much Worf. I was also surprised to read that Andy was listed as 31 of all time TV dads. So let's compare. And I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. By the way, room, this started with a simple tweet, and I think it's fair to say I am the biggest NYPD Blue fan among the members or groupies or whatever we are, LOL. Worf had one son. He is practically thrown at his lap in the TNG episode Reunion. TNG decided to use a cheat and send him off to Worf's parents. We see very little time of Worf and Alexander. Andy, on the other hand, is a great father to Theo and his two other kids, hence why people think he's Mr. Dad. But what about his first son, Andy Jr., the son he abandoned, the son he was drunk during most of his life, and the son he lost early? If we compare Andy J to Alexander, is Andy greater than Worf? Fun? See you. Andy is better than Worf with Andy J in the sense that, I mean, we never actually see what kind of a father Andy is to Andy Jr. because we don't meet Andy Jr. until he's already an adult. Like the show, the portion of Andy's life that is seen in the show is after Andy J was a kid. So we don't actually see that. We are told about it. So it's hard to judge that because we don't see that in the show. But the thing I notice that is a contrast between Andy Sipowicz as a dad to Andy J and Worf as a dad to Alexander is, despite whatever an asshole Andy may have been when Andy Jr. was growing up, despite what a shitty father he may have been back then, and all of his abuse and his alcoholism and all of his many vices that were that had fully taken a hold of him during that portion of his life. By the time we get to the little bit of Andy J's life that we see in the show, he and Andy Sr. get to a point where they have a pretty good relationship. They seem to be able to kind of put the past behind them and embrace each other as father and son. And that's why what ultimately happens to Andy J is one of the reasons why what ultimately happens to Andy J is so heartbreaking, so tragic, because it seemed like they were on their way to having a really good relationship as father and son, as both adults, and then they don't get to have that. Whereas Worf and Alexander, their relationship is much more fraught. They do seem to reach some kind of understanding at the very end. Like Alexander's grown-up Alexander, I think only appears in 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine. And by the end of the first one, they have kind of reached an understanding. And then Alexander appears again in the wedding episode later that season, or the following season, I think. Or maybe it is later that season. But anyway, doesn't matter. And they've kind of reached an understanding, but it just doesn't seem like they're destined to be as close as Andy J and Andy were before tragedy struck in NYPD Blue. So I think I would give the nod to Andy on that one for sure, just based on what we see of their relationship in the show. Carlisle, the cinephile. Hello, Steve. I, like many others, recently finished watching X-Men 97, and I absolutely loved it. And it's got me thinking about how the MCU is slowly but surely incorporating the X-Men into their live-action movies, and the prospect has me lukewarm at best. This show, along with Invincible and the Spider-Verse movies, have solidified my opinion that animation is the absolute best way to adapt comic book stories. So I'm not looking forward to a live-action adaptation as much, but the main reason for my skepticism is how the MCU doesn't have the best track record when it comes to depicting the plight of marginalized or oppressed groups. The most egregious example to me was how the Flag Smashers and Carly Morgenthau were handled in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Based on their track record, I'm worried they'll do a both sides type argument to avoid angering one side or the other when X-Men is a property that demands a clear side be taken. What do you think? I mean, I agree with you. That would not be a good way to go with the X-Men. I can understand why you're concerned. I will wait until there is an actual MCU X-Men movie to judge before I start to worry about that. I will say, yes, the MCU has not always had the best track record as far as that goes, but you know, X-Men 97 was a really good show and was very, very political, really leaned into the allegorical elements of the X-Men, even harder than the old cartoon show did. Like, it's way more political, more overtly, like undeniably in your face political than the original show was. So, and I mean, yeah, it's a cartoon, but it's on the same streaming service as all the rest of the shit's going to be. You know, when they finally do a full on MCU X-Men movie, whenever that is, that's going to be on Disney Plus, ultimately just the same as X-Men 97. It's produced under the same corporate umbrella. So if they're willing to do it for X-Men 97 and see how successful that show has been. I mean, it's been a really popular show and a virtually universally critically acclaimed show. So if you know, if it happened there, if it's possible for the X-Men to be done justice there, it's at least possible for them to be done justice in a live action project as well. Now, is it going to happen? I don't know. Is it possible that they will try to water down the concept and neuter the concept for a movie that they hope will be a massive mainstream hit? Yeah, of course. And it probably will happen to some extent, but will it happen to the extent that it completely guts the entire thing? I hope not. But I don't know. Like, I am cautiously optimistic and waiting until we actually have a movie to judge. I am so freaking tired. This is Dana, everybody. So graduation at my new school was last night. I was wondering what, if anything, you remembered of your own high school graduation. Did your family go out to eat? I think ours was in June when I graduated. It was so hot. Was your robe polyester? And why am I so tired even though I didn't get up to exercise this morning? Anyway, happy pre-Memorial Day. Hi to everyone in the chat. I think you're tired because it's the end of a school year. You've been teaching school all year, and now you're finally at the end, and your body is just exhausted, and you're psychologically done. You're bereft. You need to decompress. You need to just take a break and just not do anything for a while. I think that's part of the reason why you're so tired. Also, I think it probably wears you out because every time you have a free moment, you're constantly saying how tired you are. And I think just the physical exertion of saying that over and over again is just making you even more tired. What do I remember my high school graduation? I remember I hated it. I remember I didn't want to be there. I thought it was a waste of time. I remember I did not wear dress clothes under my robe. I just wore jeans and a shirt. I just wore whatever I had worn to school that day, just jeans and my normal shirt. Everybody else, or almost everybody else, had, the nice like a nice crisp button-up shirt and slacks, and the girls had nice dresses on, and I just wore my jeans and t-shirt that I had worn that day. And what else? I don't remember what the robe was made of. It was probably polyester, but I don't remember. I don't think I knew at the time. Did we go out to eat? I don't think we did. At least not that night. I know that night after the graduation ceremony, we just came home. We may have gone out to eat the following weekend. But I don't remember that specifically. It seems like something we would have done. It would have been me, my parents, my brother, and Pap and Granny, my dad's parents. We probably all went out somewhere to eat to celebrate, but I don't remember specifically. But I just remember, and I still feel very strongly to this day, the way that most high school graduations are done is atrocious because they're centered on the parents, not on the kids. And it's just, I hate it. I despise it. I despised my graduation ceremony. And I went to my brother's a few years later when he graduated, and I felt the same way. I thought this this is for the parents. This is not for the kids, you know. I noticed at our graduation ceremony and my brother's graduation, the graduation speaker was talking to the parents in the audience, not the kids on the stage, which I thought was fucked up. Like, you should be addressing us. We're the graduating class. We're the reason everybody's here. You should be talking to us. And ostensibly they were. Like, that's the thing. Like, the content of the speech the speeches was such that they were speaking to us, right? Their message was to us, but they were looking at us. They were looking at our parents and everybody in the audience. I was not a fan of my graduation. Last question. Air One Fire's evil identical twin. Answer yes or no. Is the answer to this question yes? Yes. Always affirm. Always affirm. Well, that's it for the patron and member questions. Now, of course, I will be turning my attention momentarily to the live chat. And by the way, hi everybody in the live chat. Thanks for sticking with me through all of the patron and member questions. But of course, before I turn my full attention to the live chat, it is time to premiere a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. So as always, this short will be published on this YouTube channel tomorrow as a standalone 60-second YouTube short, but you get to see the whole thing in full frame tonight, right now, because you are watching Ask Away. So please enjoy this brand new Stuffy and Friends short. What should I do?
Do about what?
Have you not been paying attention?
I was prompting you to deliver exposition.
Don't be meta. I tweeted that the movie Jammin' Bread Jamboree 2, All Jammed Up, was a beautiful film made by people who are obviously beautiful human beings the day before the director, writer, producer, and music supervisor were all arrested for being part of an illegal corpse selling scheme. How do I avoid being canceled for this?
Steal your dead grandmother's identity and move to Wyoming and start over.
No. Hans?
Make a stirring apology video where you throw yourself upon the mercy of the public.
Beneath my dignity, I refuse to debase myself. Stuffy.
You expressed an opinion about a movie before you knew anything about the crimes of the people who made it, and you're not really famous enough to get canceled anyway, so I say just do nothing.
Yes! I like it. Let's get to work, people. Move it! I want to hit the ground running. Ta-da! Thank you, everybody. And Geek, yeah, I don't plan on having Hans be meta in all of the shorts that he appears in, but I was writing this one and I was trying to just think of things for everybody to say during that part where I'm asking them for advice. Or just give, I was thinking of just what can I give Hans in this? Because I knew I wanted Hans to be in it, and I knew that this would probably be his second appearance after his reintroduction in the shorts. So I just put the meta thing in there just for, I'm not gonna make that a regular thing. Hans isn't going to be meta continuously, but I thought that would be a funny callback. I'm glad you appreciate it. Always affirm what Dana says. You know, I thought of the same thing. Great minds. Kara says, didn't get that kind of graduation until I attended university. That was all right. I did not attend my my college commencement. I had them send me my degree in the mail. I did not attend. I knew soon, from the moment I enrolled in college, I knew I was not going to be fucking walking across the stage at the end of it, because I absolutely detested my high school graduation so much. So I did not experience that. So Random Geek, yes, this is a Nightwing shirt. And someone says, a Loki Frog says, is that a Stife bear? No, none of the stuffed animals in the Stuffy short you just saw are Stife. No. Oh, and Dana, you said something earlier. The parents are the ones paying the taxes. Fuck them. So the kids are the ones who fucking graduated. The kids are the ones who got through 13 years of school if they went to kindergarten. the parents paid the taxes. Fuck them. I don't give a fuck. It shouldn't be about them. It should be about the students who are graduating. Fuck. Who gives a fuck if they paid their taxes? Who gives a fuck? You know what your taxes paid for? Your fucking kids being educated. Motherfucker. I know you didn't probably mean it this way, Dana. I know we agree on this for the most part, but the whole idea of, oh, my taxes paid for it, fuck you. Your taxes fund our society, motherfucker. That's the reward you get for your taxes. You get to live in a fucking society with a government and functioning institutions. So I think you could probably, if you have kids going to public school who are graduating, I think if you wanted to attend their graduation, you could probably stomach sitting there and watching a ceremony that was focused on them instead of you and your fucking tax-paying ass. Fuck that whole idea. Oh, the parents paid their taxes. Fuck them. Fuck them. Anyway. Oh, Daniel Beschers. Ooh, what a great question. Since you had favorite villains, can we also get your favorite heels? Yes. Oh, man. So, well, currently, Gunther is my favorite heel. Gunther is an amazing heel. Oh, my God. So of wrestlers who are currently active, Gunther far and away. Drew McIntyre has been really good as a heel lately too. But overall, like classically, I mean, Jake the Snake, the $1 Million Man, Roddy Piper, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, great heel tag team. The Midnight Express, either version. Actually, I mean, technically there are more than two versions, but either, Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton or Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, either, well-known famous pairing of the Midnight Express. Rick Rude, Ric Flair, obviously, but Ric Flair gets enough praise, I think. I mean, Ric Flair, of course, was a great heel. Yeah. Oh, so many great wrestling heels. Oh man, so many. Yeah. I'm not holding back. Yeah, CMAC functioning. Good point. Good point. Theoretically functioning in certain ways. Yes, good point. Ace Rumble says, I enjoyed your video on the new Quantum Leap. Do you plan to do one for the postmortem? Not at this time. I might have something to say about it at some point, but I don't have anything sort of cooking for that at the moment. Some Random Geek says, if you were in a movie club and the club is watching a rotation of animated films, what animated movies would you pick for a movie club or film club? Oh boy. The Iron Giant. Wings of Oniyamas. Grave of the Fireflies. If I really wanted to fuck people, hey everybody, let's watch Grave of the Fireflies. You're going to love it. I mean, those are really probably my big three in terms of like my very, very favorite animated movies. Still Seda, that's a good point. Only a small number of parents are going to be homeowners, so it's technically not them paying the taxes because, yes, schools are funded through property taxes in this country. Although I guess if you're renting, then you could say your rent is subsidizing the landlord paying their property taxes, so you're still you're paying into it in some way. Oh, Ethan had this on silent and suddenly saw him get animated and was like, what did I miss? Oh, that's great. Yeah, James, exactly. Our taxes are pretty low compared to the rest of the world. And by the way, and this is the fucked up part, it's upside down from how it should be. The richer you are, the lower your taxes are in terms of, percentage of your income that you end up having to pay. So yeah, and in exchange, we get to live in a civil society. So any parent who would complain about a more student-focused graduation can go fuck themselves. Especially if they're like, well, but my taxes paid. Fuck you. Then don't come. Then don't come to the graduation, motherfucker. hypothetical parent who would complain about non-existent student-centered graduation ceremonies. Fuck you. Super chat from Isaiah. The score to Moths will also be rather basic. Take Lionel Richie's Stuck on You, but the vocals removed and just the opening instrumentals to symbolize an innocent scene like a girl playing outside. I can dig that. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. Yeah, I can kind of see that. Dana, you said the rent thing too. Sean O'Sullivan, what is the best Star Trek show and why is it Deep Space Nine? It is Deep Space Nine because Deep Space Nine was the best written and had the best actors. I mean, I could go into a lot more detail, but that's basically it. Best writing, best characters, best actors. Yellow Submarine. Okay, yeah, Yellow Submarine. I tell you what else is a good one, Geek. The Triplets of Belleville. I don't know if you've ever seen The Triplets of Belleville. The great movie. Carlisle the Cinephile says, I fucking hated my graduation too, and I wasn't just forced to go to mine. I was in choir, so I had to sing at every ceremony for the 4 years I was in high school. I'm so sorry to hear that. Lesbiandria. I had to think a second how to pronounce that. Lesbiandria. That's clever. ICQ is shutting down after 30 years of active service next month. Well, that kind of bums me out. I used to use ICQ. I was on ICQ a lot back in the day. I haven't used it for years and years and years. I actually, it wouldn't have surprised me if you had told me it had already been shut down years ago. I haven't even thought about it for a while. That bums me out. Oh, ICQ. I remember that. That takes me back to my teenage years. ICQ may have been my first. It was either ICQ or AOL Instant Messenger, AIM. I used back in the day at various times and occasionally concurrently. I was on ICQ and AIM and Yahoo Messenger. I kept in touch with various people through all three of those at one time or another. AIM was probably the first, but I used ICQ a lot too. I can't remember exactly. It might have come before. It might have come first. CMX says, Dana, what about other hypotheticals we can get Steve animated about? Well, Kara, I'm not going to force you to watch. I mean, this film society that I'm supposedly choosing movies from doesn't exist. So if you don't want to watch Grave of the Fireflies, you don't have to. Favorite Tim Curry role? Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, the original It miniseries is cheesy as hell, but he is really good as Pennywise in that. Like, really good. Obviously, I mean, he's really good in Clue. He's really good. Actually, Dana just showed me a couple months ago. Dana showed me the 1993 or 1994 Three Musketeers movie with Oliver Platt and Kiefer Sutherland and Charlie Sheen. And Tim Curry plays the villain in that, and he's fantastic in that. 225 AD says, Wednesday, I got hung up on Garrick's former Cardassian oppressor name tag. What's the point of inviting him to discuss history if you're going to make him wear an I'm a bad guy tag? I don't know. To fuck with him if he decides to show up. To give him a little, to say, hey, by the way, yeah, thanks for showing up. Thanks for showing up to our conference. And just in case you thought we forgot, fuck you. Probably something like that. Maybe so they could say, hey, they were hoping he would feel so disrespected that he would leave. And they could say, hey, we invited a Cardassian guy to come. He didn't show up, or he refused to participate, like something like that. I mean, honestly, like you could say, and I noticed in the chat at the time on Wednesday night, you said like, well, is it in bad faith and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, sure it is, but can you blame him? Like, if a conference of Holocaust survivors invited a former Nazi to speak at their conference and he showed up to speak and they put like Nazi motherfucker or murdering bastard on his name tag, I mean, sure, he could complain about it, but fuck him. You know? Oh, Philip, yeah, King, yeah, mentioned Tim Curry in Three Musketeers. At least they were nice enough to make former clear on the tag. There you go. See, Simon's looking on the bright side of it. Oh, Carlisle, Jesus. You don't know pain until you have to sing Land of Hope and Glory over and over and over as every graduating student files in and out. Fucking torture. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like torture. 255 AD. Yeah, that's a good point. The accusations must have been fake if they're getting to work again, because if they did something that was really all that bad, why would they be able to get work in Hollywood or whatever again? I think that's a good point. I think that's why it's important for people like Kevin Spacey to not, to not get to have careers after those kinds of things, even if they're not held legally responsible. Like, okay, so in the eyes of the law, he didn't commit a crime, but what he did, or in all likelihood did, is still inexcusable and unacceptable. And nobody should be expected to work with a guy like that, So fuck him. Hi, Ash Lucia. I finally caught you live. Well, I'm glad you're here. Daryl Lett says, hypothetical, how big of a crowd would Bernie Sanders have attracted at that Sheetz location in Pittsburgh? I don't know, but I bet it would have been pretty big. I mean, look, you got Bernie Sanders and MTOs. What more could people want? There would have been 1 million people there. It would have been as big as Trump's fucking crowd in New Jersey and that other one on that beach combined. That's okay, Dana. If you have to go to sleep, that's okay. You can turn in. You've more than earned a good night's sleep. John Collins says, why doesn't Tony Khan simply get into the streaming business so that he can see an even playing field where his product ranks so that people can watch their pay-per-views apples to apples with WWE? I mean, I don't think it's as simple as Tony Khan just saying, I want to be on a streaming service. I mean, AEW by itself is not big enough to do what WWE initially did and start its own streaming service. And honestly, given the size of the audience that AEW has been drawing for the last couple of years, which is small and getting smaller, he probably wouldn't be able to get nearly as good of a deal for putting his product on a streaming service, or get as popular of a streaming service interested in hosting his content as he would like. So it's a lot more complicated than just the owner of the company saying, I want to be on a streaming service. I'm sure he would love to be. I'm sure Tony Khan, if the CEO of Max came to Tony Khan and say, hey, guess what, buddy, we're going to put AEW on Max, next day streaming for all your content, and we're going to offer your pay-per-views on Max to subscribe. I'm sure Tony would love that. But someone has to come to him with that deal, Isaiah, I don't know if the other NASA guy in the Ask Away has seen your Guy Blue for doing. That was Andy, right? I don't know if Andy has seen your uniform. Oh, Meta, this is a good question. When will the next Ensign's Log live show be? Soon, probably sometime in the next few weeks. We haven't decided on a date yet, myself and Jason and Dana, but it will be soon. It will be in the next several weeks at least. We're not sure yet though. 255 AD says, my problem with it is, this is about the Garrick name tag thing. It gives credence to his claim that he was being treated unfairly when the other characters were insisting they were polite to him. Yeah, but so what if Garrick thinks he was treated unfairly? That's just Garrick. Like a lot of what Garrick's point of view is very Garrick centered and very Cardassian centered. I mean, just because Garrick has a particular point of view, that doesn't mean that that point of view is a proper or respectable point of view. Like, of course he feels disrespected. He doesn't think the occupation was that big of a deal, clearly, or still has somewhat of a romantic view of it based on some things he says during the main part of the episode when they're back in time on Terok Nor, or seemingly back in time on Terok Nor. And he feels disrespected by wearing a name tag that says former oppressor. Of course, that's how he feels that way. He's Garrick. But fuck him. Brian Baker says, long day, but I'm here. Glad you can make it. What do you think is the best solution for the Republicans in November? Vote against them. Vote for Democrats. The best solution to Republicans is always vote for Democrats. Philip Kehoe says, a future Star Trek movie, a new ship and crew not called Enterprise, set in the Kelvinverse. Honestly, the thing that bothers me the most about the news that has come out recently about the possible upcoming new Star Trek movie is apparently they want it to be another prequel. They want it to be a founding of the Federation type story, like a Star Trek origin story. Please, please, please stop doing that. Now, if it was, I don't give a fuck what timeline anything takes place in. Kelvinverse, prime timeline, whatever. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. But a new ship, a new crew, I'm listening. It might turn out to be the shits, but the idea of a new ship with a new crew, especially if it's going to be a crew of like completely original characters where it's not, the captain is the great grandfather of some character from TNG or whatever, like just completely independent new characters that we've never met before, that aren't related to people we've met before, on a ship we've never heard of before, telling a completely different story. Kelvin timeline, prime timeline, I don't give a fuck. I would be interested to see what it was. Warren Erickson, that's a good one. The solution to republicanism is free college. Absolutely. Absolutely. Industrial strength solvent. That's a good suggestion too, Simon. Milkshakes in the face. Loud boos and causing a ruckus at every one of their speeches and rallies. Ace, yeah, I mean, I like I've said in videos a couple of times, a Fenris Rangers show would potentially have been interesting because you could have set it sort of on the periphery of Starfleet. There could have still been Starfleet characters in it from time to time. Like Starfleet could have still had a presence, but the point of the show would be, when the influence of the Federation and Starfleet reaches its limit, there's this group that kind of comes in to fill the gap, and that would be the Fenris Rangers. And it would be a way of telling stories in the Star Trek universe and still telling stories that fit the Star Trek ethos in terms of social commentary and stuff like that, but to do it from a perspective that we haven't seen before, at least on a series-wide basis. I thought that would have been much more interesting than, the TNG reunion show for Picard season 3, or the fucking, Seven as the captain of the Enterprise series that a lot of fans seem to really want. Oh, good night, Dana. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. Thanks for hanging in there as long as long as you did. Sean, it might have. I mean, we're talking about an imaginary show, so if you see it like a Firefly reboot, I guess I can't say you're wrong. But to me, the difference between Firefly and a Fenris Rangers show is, based on what little we learn about them from Seven, the Fenris Rangers are a group that is dedicated to a greater good. They're like they're a a kind of justice-seeking, peacekeeping, humanitarian organization. You know, they're private, they're independent, maybe they're considered outlaws by certain institutions, but their overall goal, even though they're operating outside the law, is to help people. They're kind of like benevolent vigilantes. Whereas the crew on Firefly were, you know, they were conducting private business. Like they were traders. They were, you know, and they were, I mean, they acted heroically. They weren't bad guys. Like they helped people in a lot of the episodes, but their main modus operandi was they're making a living. They're conducting business, you know, and the Fenris Rangers are not a business conducting organization. They're more of a, like, you know, a sort of a community activist organization. John Collins asks, who will Trump's running mate be? I mean, wouldn't it be fucking hilarious after all this if he asked Mike Pence again? I have no idea who it's going to be. I honestly don't know. But wouldn't it be hilarious? Kane20C says Terry Metalis got tapped to do a Vision show for the MCU. Thoughts? I mean, at least it means he's not going to do Star Trek anytime soon, presumably. So I can kind of be like, oh, okay. Give him some other shit to do. He might actually be better for Vision than he would be for Star Trek, because even though Vision has a lot of lore from the comics that could be drawn on and imported into the show, Vision, and like there's not a lot of nostalgia bait about the MCU version of the Vision that he can put in the show, because Vision we didn't really see all that much of Vision in the MCU. He was a supporting character in a couple of movies and in the WandaVision show, and that was basically it. Like there's not, you know, a lot of, where's he going to get the member berries from? So he's actually going to have to write. He's actually going to have to write a show. So he might actually be okay with that. But yeah, the good news about that from my perspective, just purely as a Star Trek fan, is if he's working on a Vision series and he can't do any more fucking Star Trek. Oh, some random. Yes, there is a patron member hangout on Sunday. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Oh, and Brian, yes, Morgan Spurlock. Yeah, Morgan Spurlock died. Yes, yes. Congratulations to him for figuring out a way to get paid for eating McDonald's for a month. And making a movie about it and getting nominated for an Oscar and having a whole career based on the fact that he figured out a way to get paid for eating McDonald's for a month. Good for him. Carlisle, I have not seen the Fallout show. No. Stephen, this is a good suggestion. How about a Star Trek series based around 24th century model train enthusiast? The only problem I see with this is there an existing canon character who was a model train enthusiast? Like if we can't tie it to a pre-established character from a beloved previous series from 30 or 40 years ago, then I just don't know why even do it. You expect us to introduce a new character and build a whole show around a character that audiences have never met before? Don't be ridiculous. It would be, you know, it would be really funny if the Terry Metalis Vision series was still just full of Star Trek Easter eggs. Like if writing for Picard just completely ruined him as a writer and just utterly broke his brain to the point that he cannot write anything that isn't just a meaningless stream of TNG Easter eggs. So even in the MCU, it'd be like, oh, look, there's Captain Picard. What the fuck is he doing here? Isaiah, sure. I'd love to hear about your movie poster. Dr. Ben Carson as Trump's running mate. And, you know, Trump might do that because, I mean, he loves pretending that he doesn't hate black people. So he could pick a black running mate and be like, see? Huh? And he could say, look at my beautiful black person who's my running mate. Look at my beautiful black vice president. You know, like he actually did in real life. Look at my beautiful African American down in the front row. Data is a model train. Nicely done, Daniel. Nicely done. Yeah, Ace. Vision versus Borg Queen confirmed. Exactly. 285 AD says, I'm considering not voting in July because Labor are so ridiculously ahead in the polls. How far ahead in the polls would the Dem candidate have to be for you to not vote? I would always vote. I would always vote. Because you never actually know what's going to happen. No, and look, I live in Maryland, which is a pretty solidly Democratic state, at least as far as the presidential election. So, I mean, like, strictly speaking, I guess I don't have to vote for Joe Biden. He's still going to probably win our electoral votes, but I'm still going to vote for him because I feel like it's a cop-out not to. I feel like if I don't vote for the Democratic candidate, then I am choosing my own comfort over doing what is best for the country. And I don't want to act in the election as though it is about me and my conscience and my comfort and my preferences. I want to do the best thing for the country. And even though he sucks in 100 different ways, President Joe Biden is better for the country than President Donald Trump. So I'm going to do my part to make sure that happens, even though my actual material contribution may be negligible because he's going to win my state anyway. I'm still going to do it because I feel like it's a cop-out not to. Oh, good night, Carlisle. Glad you could be here, my friend. Yeah, Stephen, exactly. But moral purity, exactly. First of all, I have no moral purity. I'm already morally impure. That train has left the station. And yes, my own morality tells me that it is morally unacceptable for me to choose my own imagined moral purity over doing what is best for the country and voting for the better candidate, even if that candidate is, as is the case in this election for sure, deeply, deeply, deeply flawed. Random Geek, I'm not sure. Am I going to do more than voting? I'm not sure if I am or not. In the past couple of election cycles, Dana and I have done phone banking. I don't know if she wants to do that this time again or not. If she asks me to, I'll probably do phone banking with her. I'm thinking about doing get out the vote postcards. I've seen Greta Christina posting about that on social media. She does get out the vote postcards. I'm thinking about doing that or something like that as an additional contribution instead of above and beyond just voting. Yeah, Ricky, Maryland has a pretty important set. You're damn right. It is super, super important to vote for the Democratic nominee in the Senate race. Absolutely. Fuck Larry Hogan. Fuck Larry Hogan from here to eternity. Larry Hogan is the Republican nominee. And, you could say, I haven't seen polls recently, but you could probably say he has an advantage because he is a former governor and he's running for the Senate. So yeah, absolutely. Every vote is going to count in the Senate race. Ethan Horn says Star Trek needs new characters. They also need to stop fearing canon. Break it. Freak the canon people out. It's all cool. I wish it evoked my imagination more, but I agree. I agree completely, Ethan. It's exactly how I feel. Yannick Muller says, I like Discovery Season 5 so far, but having several established characters be absent for most of the season really seems off. I assume it was for budgetary reasons. Thoughts? Yeah, it does. It feels weird, even though they've done absolutely nothing with those characters. It feels weird to not have Detmer and Awoshikun at the forward stations on the bridge. They've given Detmer a little bit of development, but they've done really nothing with Awoshikun, which is a terrible shame. But yeah, it does feel weird not to have them. And it feels weird that Saru was absent for like 3 or 4 episodes in a row. With that, I think that was a scheduling conflict. With Saru, it wasn't a budget thing. It was Doug Jones had another gig lined up and he just couldn't be there for those number of episodes. Like it was a scheduling conflict and they had to write Saru out for a certain number of episodes. But as for why Detmer and Awoshikun aren't around since like the first or second episode, I have no idea. But it is, even like I said, even though their characters have been completely wasted, it does feel weird not to have them there, given that this is the final season. Also, something else about season 5 I noticed, and what was it? The last week's episode when Reese is briefly in charge of the ship. Well, yeah, it was the library one when Reese has the bridge when the other characters are on the library. I felt like that character got more development in those few scenes of just having him be in charge of the ship and seeing him be in command and interact with the rest of the bridge crew from that position than we've gotten for that character in the last 4 years. And it really brought home to me one of the real weaknesses of Discovery's writing in terms of its characterization is that far too often it has tried to get us to get invested in its characters by telling us about them rather than just showing them to us. You know, like I remember in season 3 and 4, they did this where there would be like every couple of episodes, there would be a scene where like a random character that we haven't really gotten to know would just share some of their backstory. You know, like Awoshikun would tell the captain some story about some shit that happened to her when she was a kid. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. You know, I think Reese had one of those too, where he told a story about something that happened when he was a kid or something that he used to like when he was a kid or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's nice. I feel like I know more about him just by seeing him be in command of the ship, by getting to spend time with him and watch him doing stuff. That's how you get characters over. That's how you get to know characters. Let us watch them do stuff. Let us see who they are by what they do. And that's been a big problem with Discovery's writing, especially for those minor characters that we really don't get much out of. But for major characters, too, I feel like that's one of the big problems with Michael. And I want to like Michael so much because Sonequa Martin Green is such a great actor. And Michael has had her moments here and there where she's been terrific. And she's a really good action hero. When they give Sonequa action scenes and Michael gets to be an action hero, she's terrific. But too often they do this, they try to write her where she's either other characters are telling us things about her or she's telling other characters and therefore us things about herself. Like she gets this great big long character revealing monologue in last week's episode, in the library episode, where she's telling the telepathic image of Book all this stuff about herself and her relationships and her doubts and her fears. And it's really, really well performed. Like Sonequa is killing it. She's doing a great job with the performance of it. But even at the end of it, I don't feel like I know Michael any better than I did before because she's just telling us stuff about herself. And we don't get to see her do stuff that defines her as a character nearly as often as we should. And it kind of crystallized that for me, that episode. Because like I've said many times, I like Discovery. There's a lot about it that I really, really enjoy. But it has been a deeply flawed show from the very beginning. And the flaws are almost all in the writing. And that really crystallized one of the major problems with the writing for me. I've talked about the difficulty that they have always had and continuing up to this current season. They've never been able to tell a consistently well-paced, well-told, serialized season-long story. Like this season is no different. Like they've never gotten that right. And they've done it. They've tried to do it every single season and they've never gotten it right. And they've never even really, except for season 2 a little bit, they've never really even gotten all that much better at it. Not when judged as an entire season, but I also realized, they've kind of dropped the ball with the character writing as well. And I think that's a major part of it, is that they're telling us stuff about these characters rather than showing us. Super chat from Kevsha. Thank you very much. Long time watcher, first time catching you live. I appreciate all your commentary, not only on Star Trek, but on the current political climate in our country. Keep doing what you're doing. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the generosity. And I'm glad you could be here. Harry Behemoth, did I know that Doug Jones was one of the gentlemen on Buffy? Yes, I did know that. Yes, I did know that. Oh, Stephen, was it Hocus Pocus 2? Was that what he was doing? Well, there you go. Well, you wouldn't have wanted to miss that. Geek asks, is there anything political praxis I plan to do that isn't tied to voting or electoralism? Probably not. not at the moment. Um, And Vanessa, I agree with that. Vanessa Maldonado says it's not about moral purity, but about listening to your base and making sure you work with activists who you need to get out the vote instead of spitting it. Yeah, absolutely. That's part of what I don't think I made that specific point, but the video I put out earlier today about, Democrats get it together. That's part of the larger point I was trying to make with that. Like there are people on the ground. There are people who are um, sympathetic to the Democratic cause, the Democratic Party cause, that they are not doing very much or anything at all to get excited about them or want to vote for them or want to encourage other people to vote for them. And that to me just seems incredibly foolish. Um, oh, and Daryl says, I watched a video on the Maryland Democrat Senate primary. So who did you like, Trone or Brooks? I think I voted for Trone because Trone was my member of Congress, and I thought he was. I always thought he did a good job, so I voted for Trone. But I'm very very pleased and very happy to vote for Angela also Brooks, and I think she will make a fantastic senator, and I'm looking forward to voting for her, and I'm really hoping she wins. Um, Here is a member message from Boxy Brown. Will there be mail-in voting this time around? I think it depends on where you live, but yeah, there's mail-in voting here in Maryland, where I live. I mail-in voted for the primary, and I'm going to mail-in vote for the general as well. Here in Maryland, they allow you to permanently opt in to mail-in voting, and I did as soon as they introduced that during the pandemic, and they kept it as a permanent thing, and I did that as soon as it was an option. Fuck yes, vote by mail, yes please. So here in Maryland, I vote by mail and everything, um, and there are other states where it's automatic mail-in voting as well. But I think it depends on what your jurisdiction is. Hi, Caitlin. I'm glad you made it. Um, Oh, older super chats. Sorry, Stephen. I didn't notice that you had a couple in here. First one is challenge. Name a black person on Batman 66 other than Eartha Kitt. You know what? I don't know. I don't think I can. And also, you like Built to Spill. Why haven't you mentioned this before? We might have avoided that whole Phil Collins fiasco. You know what you need to get your head around, man? You need to accept the fact, okay? By the way, I'm sorry for missing your super chats. Um, you need to accept the fact that I like both Built to Spill and Phil Collins. Okay. I like them both. No, I'm not going to rank them. I'm not going to say I like one more than the other. I think it's all music, man. It's all beautiful. But I like them both. Phil Collins, Built to Spill. Like that. See that? Like that. Um, Yeah, Philip, exactly. It's Saru and Tilly are my two favorite characters on the show too. I love Tilly. I love Saru. They're two of my favorite. They may be my two, other than maybe Captain Pike from Strange New Worlds. They may be my two favorite Star Trek characters. Period. In the current generation of shows, I think they're both fantastic. But Michael, it's like I want to like Michael. I don't not like her. Like there's a lot of really negative, like a lot of people really hate Michael Burnham, and I don't get the hate that she gets. I don't understand. I mean, for some of it, I understand it, but not all of it is like that. But there's a lot of really negative sentiment toward her, and I don't feel that way about her. I want to like her so much, and I feel like I can't because, and I that's it sort of was brought home to me in that episode from last week. It's like I don't feel like I know her, you know, after almost 5 seasons. Like I don't feel like I know her. Um, Oh, Sean O'Sullivan, you know what? I didn't know this. Did you know Baltimore is named for a town in Cork, Ireland, meaning land of the big house? I didn't know that. No, I knew. See, it's named after Lord Baltimore. Well, I guess Lord Baltimore. I guess Baltimore comes from the town in Cork, meaning land of the big house. I did not know that. 28580, no, I'm not judging you. If you feel like it's safe for you not to vote, okay. I'm just saying, for me personally, I always vote. Even if the polls tell me that the election is going to be a landslide in favor of my side, I always vote. Harry Behemoth says Steve hates having to go out where there's other people. I avoid it if I can. If I can easily avoid it and still accomplish the same thing, then I'll usually choose the option that doesn't involve going out. Yeah, that's fair enough. Steve, I just threw up in my mouth. Built to Spill and Phil Collins. You know what? I hope they collaborate. I hope Phil Collins puts out a new album and Doug March plays guitar on it. What do you think of that? Was that projectile vomit? Harry Behemoth says, do you like Phil Collins better in or out of Genesis? I have a great admiration for both phases of Phil Collins' career. I will say, just based on the pure cheese factor, I prefer his solo work. Phil Collins' solo stuff is some of the all-time great musical cheese. I love the fact that so many of his songs are about him being a fucking shitty boyfriend. I just find that hilarious. But think about it. Go back and listen to some Phil Collins like solo singles from the 80s. So many of them are about Phil Collins just being a shitty fucking boyfriend. And he doesn't seem to realize it. He's not like apologizing in the song for being a shitty boyfriend. He's just describing thoughts and feelings and behaviors that a shitty boyfriend would do. And that's a part of the song. It's hilarious to me. 255 AD, did I see your last comment on the Garrick thing? Let me scroll up and find it. I'd have the Starfleet people say something like, you were invited as a courtesy to learn from the Bajoran perspective, not to debate them. Does that make sense? Yeah, that would have worked too. Having the other characters kind of react to Garrick like that. That would have been fine. Oh, CJ Nelson, that's kind of what I thought too, but I wasn't sure about the actual history of that it's actually named for Baltimore. They should change, like the city theme song should be Tarzan Boy. Oh, that should, that should play before every Baltimore Orioles game instead of the national anthem. Or no, they should play that. No, they shouldn't. Never mind. I was going to say they should play that during the 7th inning stretch instead of Thank God I'm a Country Boy, but that's heresy. Thank God I'm a Country Boy is a way better song than Tarzan Boy. Oh, did they, Philip? They used Against All Odds in the Fall Guy movie. Well, good for them. Or do you mean the Fall Guy TV show? Because it would have been around the same time, wouldn't it have been? They used a lot of Phil Collins songs on TV shows and movies in the 80s because they were awesome. Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. You're just not feeling well. It had nothing to do with it's not a Phil Collins fetish, man. I'm just a fan of the man's work. Okay. Are you seriously telling Stephen? Let's just talk me and you for a second. Are you seriously telling me that In the Air Tonight is not your idea of a fucking awesome song? Seriously? Like, is our taste that divergent? That if you and I were hanging out and we were listening to music and In the Air Tonight came on, are you telling me when it builds and it finally gets to the drum part, you are not going to be drumming along with me? Are you seriously telling me that? I'm going to be the only one listening to that song going, dun, 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 dun. Come on, man. You'd leave me hanging for the drum part in the air tonight? Are you serious? If so, that's, you know what? It's a matter of taste. It's completely fine. I'm just shocked if that is the case. I'm just shocked. Thank God I'm a Tarzan boy. There you go, Daniel. You bridged the gap. Thank God I'm a Tarzan boy. The movie. Oh, Emily Blunt sings it in karaoke. How about that? Oh, thank you, Caitlin. Yes, that's a good reminder to everybody. Please, if you're taking part in the chat, don't forget to click the like. It does help the stream out a lot. Thank you for that reminder, Caitlin. That's very nice of you. Okay, we're into about the final 5 minutes here, so I'm going to do my usual wrapping up. By court order, I cannot say that anyone is a bad person for liking Phil Collins. See, there is still some justice in the world. There is still some justice in the world. Some random geek says favorite Tom Lehrer song. The Werner von Braun song. I can't remember. I think, is it just called Werner von Braun? I mean, as an astronaut nerd, obviously that's my favorite. There's a lot of good Tom Lehrer songs. It's too bad Dana's not here anymore. She's a massive Tom Lehrer fan. I disagree still, Seda. The drum part is the best part of In the Air Tonight, but I love that whole fucking song, man. I love that whole fucking song. Isaiah, what am I doing for Memorial Day? I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything special. Okay, so Geek is posting the links in the chat. I will do my bit over here. So thank you all for joining me so very much. Thanks for all the great questions. Thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy my work here on YouTube and you want to help me out, you can do so by becoming a patron of this channel at patreon.com/Steve Shives, or becoming a channel member by just clicking the join button on the YouTube page for this video. If you become a patron or a member at any level, one of the perks you get is you get to submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams. Just a little thing I do to say thank you to my patrons and channel members. If they have questions for the Ask Away streams, they can put them in ahead of time, and those are the ones I answer in the first part of the show. Also, if you enjoy my YouTube stuff, you might also enjoy the podcasts that I am a co-host on. There is the Late Seating podcast that I co-host along with the great Jason Harding, the movie review podcast, where we take a look at classic films and see if they deserve their reputation, whether it's good or bad. Our new episode is our review of one of my favorite films ever, and one of my very favorite, if not my very favorite, superhero movies ever, Spider-Man 2. I loved getting to watch Spider-Man 2 again, and I love talking about it with Jason for all of you. So that's the new episode of Late Seating. And also, I'm on the Ensign's Log, which is the Star Trek-themed comedy podcast that I'm on alongside Jason and also Dana, who was here with us earlier and has now gone to bed. And the Ensign's Log is a show where Jason, Dana, and I play original characters who exist in the Star Trek universe, and our adventures are kind of happening with stuff that actually happened in the shows sort of going on in the background or in the periphery. It's a really fun show to do. We are almost done with the season. The next new episode of the Ensign's Log is the season finale. So that'll be very exciting. And then after that, at some point, we're going to take a little bit of a break in between seasons. And somewhere in that break, we're going to do a live stream on this channel with myself and Jason and Dana. We haven't exactly nailed down a date for it yet, but stay tuned. And also, don't forget charitylinks.page. It's linked in the video description. And Geek has also put a lot of the individual links in the chat for us as well. There are a lot of links in that document at charitylinks.page of people who need a little help, who need a helping hand. And if you have a few extra bucks that you can spare, we would ask that you would please consider sharing it with some people in need. And you can find those in charitylinks.page and also through the links that Geek has shared with us in the chat. So this Sunday, as was mentioned earlier, is my monthly patron and member hangout. That's another thing that I do to sort of say thank you to my supporters for the channel. Once a month, usually on the last Sunday of the month, I do a 1 hour hangout starting at noon Eastern time. It's a Zoom call with myself and a maximum of a dozen of my Patreon patrons and channel members. And this Sunday is the May edition. So I will see you, some of you who are patrons and members who are planning on joining us in the chat or joining us on the Zoom call. I will see you face to face on Sunday at noon. And for some of the rest of you who just want to watch, I'll see you not face to face, but the way I'm seeing you now. On Sunday at noon. So I'll see you for that. And then I will see you next week for all the usual stuff and see you back here in 2 weeks for another Ask Away. Let me take one final look at the live chat and see if there's any final questions or anything. There you go, Philip. It's not my department, says Werner von Braun. Yep. That's DeShong. I didn't lose Dana Ghost Wheel. She just went to sleep. I mean, she actually went to sleep. She didn't it's not a euphemism for she's dead. She went to bed and went to sleep. And are we allowed to talk to the camera on Sunday? Yes, you very much are. You are allowed to talk to the camera. Absolutely. In fact, it is encouraged. I would highly encourage it. All right. Thanks, everybody. I will see you on Sunday for the Patreon member live stream, and I'll see you the next time after that as well. Thanks for watching. Have a happy Memorial Day weekend to those of you who celebrate. Have a good night. Have a good weekend regardless. And see you later. Bye, everybody.